Duane Allman's life came to an abrupt and tragic end in a devastating high-speed motorcycle accident. But the full extent of that tragedy runs deeper than most people realize. In a deeply personal memoir, his daughter later revealed a grave medical mistake that doctors made on that fateful day, one that could never be undone. As a powerhouse in the music industry, the Allman Brothers Band reached the peak of their success just before enduring their most heartbreaking loss, the untimely passing of Duane Allman, one of the most extraordinary guitarists in history. Born in 1946 in Nashville, Tennessee, a place deeply embedded in America's rich musical heritage, Duane entered the world just 13 months before his younger brother, Greg. However, their family life was far from settled. Due to their father's military career, they frequently relocated, eventually finding themselves in Norfolk, Virginia. It was there that tragedy first struck their family in a devastating way. On December 26, 1949, Lieutenant Willis Allman, Duane's father, along with his friend Robert Buchanan, encountered a hitchhiker after an evening of drinking. Offering the stranger a ride home turned out to be a fatal decision. Led to an isolated farm, they were suddenly held at gunpoint and robbed. The altercation escalated, and in a brutal moment of violence, Duane's father was shot and killed. With their father gone, the Allman family faced the harsh reality of survival. His mother, Geraldine, made the difficult decision to pursue a career in accounting to support her children, meaning she could no longer be a full-time homemaker. Consequently, the young brothers were sent to a military academy in Tennessee. However, it was clear from the beginning that they were not destined to follow in their father's military footsteps. They despised every moment of their time there. By 1957, the family had relocated once again, this time settling in Daytona Beach, Florida. Here, the brothers attended high school and spent their summers traveling back to Nashville to visit their grandmother. It was during one of these summer visits that they unknowingly took the first step toward their future in music. A neighbor of their grandmother started teaching Greg how to play guitar, and in 1960, after saving up enough money, he purchased his first instrument, a Japanese-made Taisco silver-tone guitar. Duane, however, had different interests at the time. He was drawn to the thrill of motorcycles and opted to buy a Harley 165 instead. Yet, like many siblings, he couldn't resist taking an interest in his brother's guitar. Despite being left-handed, he frequently took possession of Greg's right-handed instrument, gradually honing his skills. Fate seemed to foreshadow the tragedies that lay ahead. In an eerie prelude to the disaster that would eventually claim his life, Duane's beloved motorcycle didn't last long. He crashed it. Although the bike was wrecked, he managed to sell the remains, using the money to purchase a silver-tone guitar of his own. From that moment on, his progression as a guitarist was swift, quickly surpassing his brother's abilities. The Allman Brothers began forming and joining bands in and around Daytona, diving headfirst into live performances. The rush of playing in front of a crowd was exhilarating, and they were hooked from the start. Duane's passion for music burned so intensely that he made a bold choice. He dropped out of school in 1965 to focus entirely on his musical career. That same year, his band, the Escorts, got an early taste of success when they opened for the Beach Boys. However, despite this promising start, the group eventually disbanded. Fortunately, Greg had just graduated, and together with several former members of the Escorts, they formed a new band, the Allman Joys, performing relentlessly across the southeastern United States. The band eventually settled in Nashville, where they rebranded themselves as Hourglass. During this time, Duane's adventurous spirit led him on an impulsive journey, disappearing for 3 days without a word. He suddenly returned to their hotel room with an unexpected announcement. He had driven to Daytona Beach to propose to his girlfriend, Patty Chanley. then continued on to South Carolina, where they got married. Duane Allman lived life without hesitation, embracing every moment as if it were his last. However, as one of his friends later reflected, he was never truly the family man type. Perhaps it was inevitable that the marriage would not last, though it did result in the birth of a daughter. Meanwhile, the band pushed forward, making their way to Los Angeles in search of greater opportunities. They landed a contract with Liberty Records and recorded 2 albums. However, creative differences soon emerged. The record label sought to mold them into a mainstream pop band, while the brothers saw themselves as authentic rock musicians, unwilling to compromise their artistic vision. The contract fell apart. An hourglass dissolved. Returning to Florida, the brothers joined forces with a folk rock band called the 31st of February, where they recorded several demos. Among the musicians in this group was drummer Butch Trucks, an essential piece of what would later become the Allman Brothers Band. With their new lineup, the group embarked on their journey to New York, full of hope for what lay ahead. Their relentless live performances helped them carve a name for themselves, leading to the release of their first album, the Allman Brothers Band, in November 1969. Unfortunately, the record failed to gain significant traction on the charts. As the band struggled to find commercial success, Duane's personal life continued to unfold in a familiar pattern. His first marriage had ended, and during a tour stop in St. Louis, he met a woman named Donna Rusman. History repeated itself. Another whirlwind romance led to the birth of another daughter, Galadriel. By 1970, life on the road had exposed Duane to a darker side of rock and roll. Immersed in a world of excess, he dived headfirst into substance use. At one point, he even overdosed on opium, yet he remained undeterred in his reckless lifestyle. That year alone, the Allman Brothers Band performed an astonishing 300 shows. Their relentless touring schedule left little time for personal lives. At one point, Duane's then-girlfriend, Donna, along with their young daughter, was asked to leave their communal home, known as the Big House, in Macon, Georgia. His newest love interest, Dixie Lee Meadows, had taken her place in his life. In the midst of his chaotic, personal world, Duane still found moments of beauty. His only self-written song, Little Martha, was composed for Dixie. Despite their growing fame, mainstream success remained elusive. Their second album, Idlewild South, released in August 1970, managed to break into the Billboard charts, but only by a narrow margin. Then, a chance encounter changed everything. At a Miami concert in 1970, Eric Clapton and his bandmates were in the audience. Deeply impressed by Duane's talent, Clapton invited him to participate in recording sessions for Layla and other assorted love songs. The collaboration was legendary. Critics hailed Duane's guitar work as some of his finest. Clapton, captivated by Duane's skill, extended an offer for him to join his band permanently. Though tempted, Duane ultimately chose to remain loyal to the Allman Brothers Band, though he continued to take on session work, including a notable recording with Wilson Pickett. A defining moment arrived in early 1969 when Duane, while attending a performance at the famed Fillmore East venue in New York, made a bold declaration to a friend. Within a year, he would be on that stage himself. True to his word, by the end of the year, the Allman Brothers Band had indeed performed there. However, their real triumph at Fillmore East was yet to come. The decision to record their third album as a live performance turned out to be a defining moment. The Live at Fillmore East album catapulted them into the spotlight, earning critical acclaim and commercial success. But just as their star was rising, tragedy struck once again. Duane Allman had always lived on the edge, embracing a lifestyle that was fast, intense, and fueled by an unwavering passion for music. Even in his teenage years, After wrecking his motorcycle and trading it in for his first guitar, he never truly let go of his need for speed. However, the very thing that had defined his thrill-seeking nature would also be the cause of his untimely demise. As the Allman Brothers Band finally reached a moment of success with their Live at Fillmore East album, their years of relentless touring and struggle seemed to be paying off. But in the autumn following this major triumph, disaster struck in the most heartbreaking way possible. It all began as a joyful evening. The band was celebrating at the Big House, their communal home in Macon, Georgia. It was the night of a birthday party for Linda Oakley, the wife of bassist Barry Oakley. After enjoying the festivities, Duane Allman left the gathering at around 5:45 p.m., unknowingly bidding farewell to the place he had called home for the last time. The date was October 29th, 1971, a day that would be forever marked in the history of rock music. As Duane sped through the streets of Macon, he rode down Hillcrest Avenue, a quiet part of the city where nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Ahead of him, a flatbed truck was visible, a common enough sight on the road. But then, in a tragic and unpredictable moment, everything took a turn for the worse. The truck made a sudden stop at an intersection. Duane, reacting in an instant, swerved to avoid crashing into it. However, fate had already decided the outcome. His motorcycle collided with either the back of the truck or a piece of equipment extending from it, causing him to be thrown violently onto the pavement. His bike, still carrying momentum, landed on top of him, dragging both itself and his broken body for another 90 feet before finally coming to a stop. Amazingly, despite the severity of the accident, he was still alive. Not long after, his girlfriend, Dixie Meadows, and Barry Oakley's sister, Candy, happened to be taking the same route. Upon witnessing the horrific scene, they rushed toward him, waiting in agonizing suspense for an ambulance to arrive. On the way to the hospital, Duane's condition took a terrifying turn. Twice he stopped breathing, and both times, paramedics fought to revive him. Miraculously, they succeeded, and with what little hope remained, he was rushed into emergency surgery. At the hospital, doctors assured his family and friends that Duane would survive. Their words provided a fragile sense of reassurance as he was taken into the operating room. Everyone held on to the belief that, despite the severity of his injuries, he would pull through. But after 3 long hours, the worst news imaginable arrived. Duane Allman had suffered catastrophic internal damage. His chest had collapsed, his coronary artery was ruptured, and his liver was irreparably damaged. According to the surgeon who operated on him, any one of these injuries could have been fatal on its own, but combined, they left little to no chance of survival. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Duane Allman was officially pronounced dead at just 24 years old. His loss sent shockwaves through the music world. His bandmates, family, and devoted fans were left shattered, mourning the untimely departure of a guitarist whose brilliance had barely been fully realized. In the days that followed, his funeral service was held in Macon, where friends, loved ones, and fellow musicians gathered to pay their respects. Renowned record producer Jerry Wexler delivered the eulogy, stating that Duane had already earned his place among the greatest blues musicians of the South, a sentiment that would only be cemented further in the years to come. Despite their grief, the Allman Brothers Band pressed forward, determined to carry on the legacy that Duane had helped to create. Though now reduced to 5 members, they went on to complete their next album, which still featured many of Duane's guitar recordings. One of these tracks was Little Martha, the song he had written for Dixie just weeks before his passing. However, for some, memories were not enough to mend the wounds left behind. Dixie Meadows, Duane's final love, took legal action in an attempt to gain control of his estate. but her efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the weight of Duane's death fell heaviest on Berry Oakley, the band's bassist and one of his closest friends. He was never the same after losing Duane. Depression crept into his life, chipping away at him even as he continued to push the band forward. Then, in a tragic and almost eerie repetition of history, disaster struck once again. Just 1 year and 13 days after Duane's fatal crash, Berry Oakley was involved in his own motorcycle accident. In a cruel twist of fate, it happened only a few blocks away from the very spot where Duane had met his own end. Though he initially walked away from the scene, appearing relatively unharmed, his condition deteriorated rapidly. He made his way back to the big house, but before long, he had to be rushed to the hospital. This time, there was no saving him. Doctors later stated that, given the severity of his injuries, his death had been inevitable, even if he had received immediate medical attention. In honor of their bond, Berry Oakley was laid to rest in Rose Hill Cemetery, right beside his fallen friend, Duane Allman. Despite the losses, the Allman Brothers Band continued through various incarnations, enduring multiple breakups and reunions. The years passed, and in 1995, the band that Duane had been instrumental in creating and shaping was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to the impact they had made on music history. However, tragedy did not end there. Gregg Allman, Duane's brother and longtime bandmate, passed away in 2017. That same year, another original member, drummer Butch Trucks, tragically took his own life. Even so, Duane Allman's legacy endures. His name remains high on lists of the greatest guitarists of all time, a testament to his extraordinary talent, his passion for music, and the brief yet brilliant life he lived. Though his time on Earth was cut short, his influence has never faded. The music he left behind continues to inspire generations of musicians and fans alike, ensuring that his story, his triumphs, his struggles, and his genius will never be forgotten. The tragic loss of Duane Allman left an irreplaceable void in the world of rock and roll. His extraordinary skill with the guitar, his unrelenting passion for music, and his ability to push boundaries had already secured him a place among the legends of his time. Yet, just as the Allman Brothers Band was beginning to realize their full potential, fate had intervened cruelly, stealing away one of their brightest stars. Even in the face of grief, the band refused to let his passing mark the end of their journey. Instead, they channeled their sorrow into their music, forging ahead with renewed determination. The result was their next album, Eat a Peach, released in February 1972. This record became an unintentional tribute to Duane, featuring some of his final guitar recordings. The album's title was inspired by a phrase Duane himself had once said in an interview. When asked what he was doing for the revolution, he responded, "Every time I'm in Georgia, I eat a peach for peace." The album was a commercial success, solidifying the Allman Brothers Band's reputation as one of the defining groups of the era. Duane's unmistakable slide guitar work shone throughout the record, serving as both a haunting reminder of his absence and a testament to his extraordinary talent. The song Little Martha, the only track he had written entirely on his own, became a particularly poignant piece, a soft and melodic instrumental that seemed to capture his spirit. But while the band pressed forward, grief still lingered heavily over them, especially for Berry Oakley. The loss of his closest friend had left him spiraling, and though he continued to perform, it was clear that he was struggling beneath the weight of his sorrow. Tragically, his pain would manifest in the most devastating way possible. On November 11th, 1972, just over a year after Duane's death, Berry was riding his motorcycle through the streets of Macon when he collided with a city bus. The crash happened just 3 blocks from the site of Duane's fatal accident, an eerie and heartbreaking parallel that sent shockwaves through the band and their fans. Though Barry initially survived the impact, he was visibly shaken. Incredibly, he declined immediate medical attention and instead made his way back to the big house, likely unaware of the severity of his injuries. However, as time passed, his condition worsened rapidly. Eventually, he was rushed to the hospital, but by then, it was too late. The doctors later confirmed that, even if he had been treated sooner, his internal injuries were so severe that survival had never been a real possibility. In a final tribute to his bond with Duane, Barry Oakley was laid to rest right beside him at Rose Hill Cemetery in Macon. The two friends, whose lives had been so intertwined in both music and fate, were reunited once again. With the loss of two of its key members in such a short span of time, the Allman Brothers Band faced an uncertain future. Yet, in true Southern rock spirit, they persevered. They recruited new members and continued making music, evolving with each era while still staying true to their original sound. However, their journey remained turbulent. The years that followed saw the band go through multiple breakups and reunions, periods of tension, and personal struggles. Gregg Allman, the band's remaining founding member, experienced his own share of hardships, including substance abuse issues, financial difficulties, and rocky relationships. Despite these challenges, the Allman Brothers Band left an enduring legacy, one that was formally recognized in 1995 when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The honor was a testament to the influence they had wielded over the rock genre, with their pioneering blend of blues, jazz, and country reshaping the sound of Southern rock forever. As the years went on, more members of the band would depart, some through tragic circumstances, others simply as time took its toll. In 2017, Gregg Allman passed away, marking the end of an era for the band he had co-founded alongside his brother. That same year, another original member, drummer Butch Trucks, took his own life, a shocking event that added yet another layer of heartbreak to the band's story. Despite these losses, the impact of the Allman Brothers Band remains undeniable. Their music continues to be celebrated by new generations of listeners, their albums still regarded as some of the finest in rock history. Duane Allman, despite his tragically short life, is consistently ranked among the greatest guitarists of all time. His contributions to the genre have never been forgotten, and his unique slide guitar technique has inspired countless musicians who came after him. Though his time was brief, Duane's influence endures. He was a musician who played with passion, lived without hesitation, and left behind a body of work that continues to captivate audiences. His story, one of raw talent, relentless drive, and tragic fate, serves as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale. The echoes of his music, his spirit, and his legacy remain as strong as ever. The Allman Brothers Band may have faced more than their fair share of hardships, but through it all, their sound, their soul, and the legend of Duane Allman continue to live on. Duane Allman was a man who thrived on adrenaline, fully immersing himself in a life of relentless energy, bold risks, and an insatiable hunger for music. From an early age, he seemed destined for an existence that burned brightly but dangerously, living without restraint as he pursued his passions with an intensity few could match. Even as a teenager, after experiencing the consequences of recklessness firsthand by crashing his motorcycle, he didn't abandon his love for speed. He simply shifted his focus toward another kind of thrill, one found in the strings of his guitar. Yet, despite the shift from 2 wheels to 6 strings, the rush he sought never truly faded. The very thing that had once fueled his drive and ambition, the need to move fast, to live on the edge, to chase after every moment with unrelenting determination, would ultimately become the force that led to his tragic end.